Different views. Different views.
I know your story.
From different choose.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Karina Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
2 Point.
Now joining us in studio is Maine State Auditor and potential congressional candidate, Matt Dunlap. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in, Matt. We know you're definitely busy, that's for sure.
Thank you for joining us for part 2.
Speaking of ranked choice voting, Karina and I saw that you might be interested in running for Congress for CD2.
Well, it's something that people have talked to me about. I've never been terribly politically ambitious, said the guy that ran for U.S. Senate. And that was something that I kind of stumbled into as well. And I can kind of give you the background on that. I mean, I never had any interest in politics. I didn't know what my journey was going to consist of. My parents were very interested in politics. They never missed an election. My mother volunteered at the polls when my parents lived in Chicago. My father got a job after World War II because his mother was a volunteer for the mayor. They were very into it. I thought it was just kind of weird. We had the board game. That was fun enough. That was good enough for me. And of course, I went to the University of Maine and I graduated. I was something of an indifferent student, one would charitably say, and nobody was knocking down my door with a job offer for a mediocre entry-level Roman historian. So I wound up working as a cook for many years and did a lot of different jobs. And I supervised students in the kitchens. We needed extra help during the school year. And one of my charges, I caught her crying by the time clock. And I thought failed a test or something, had a fight with a roommate. Well, it turned out she was the first person in her family to go to college. And she was paying her own way. Her parents lived in a trailer in a field. They got their water out of a brook, that type of poverty. And she'd fallen behind. She worked like 3 jobs. And she worked in the kitchen so she could eat something. They told her that she had fallen too far behind and they weren't going to allow her to take final exams and she had to leave. And I thought, I'm an alumni. I should be doing something about this. And I started shopping around. We helped her out in the kitchen. We took up a little collection. She didn't need much money. It was a few $100. But I thought we should have a scholarship fund. People in that situation, I started shopping the idea around. And I think now, in the fullness of time, I realized that the administrator I was meeting with was really just trying to get me the hell out of his office. And he said, have you talked to the local legislative delegation? Maybe there's some state help. And I thought, what a great idea. So the representative was brand new, John O'Day. He served 8 years. He was in the House 2 terms and Senate 2 terms. We became great friends. The idea went nowhere, but we'd go fishing together and occasional bird hunting trip. And he was very intensely interested in politics. I thought it was, again, kind of strange. And I never understood anything he was talking about. And he started talking about the idea of running for the legislature. He tried to get me to run in 92. And I said, John, I graduated 5 years ago. I got to launch. I got to get out of here. But I didn't do it. And I kind of regretted later on. I thought it could be kind of interesting. And he said, well, now's your time. This is 96. He said, Bob Keene's not running. We can't find anybody to run. And it's a long, shaggy dog story, but I finally made the decision to run. I got elected, and it was a great thing. And I got to help people. I got to do important work. I was only going to do it 1 term. I thought, we'll see if I get reelected. Then I became a committee chair. I wound up chairing 3 committees. I was speaker pro tem many times. I was on the elections committee. And then I thought, do I chuck this in the corner and go back to the bar, back to the print shop, or do I do something different? And that's when I decided to run for Secretary of State and did that for 14 out of 16 years. Just an amazing job. And of course, now auditor. In 2012, I was out of office. We'd lost the majority and I was content. The black ribbon of highway, new opportunities. I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when it dawned on me that all the stuff I was seeing in the corners and off to the side about Olympia Snow having bad poll numbers. And she had an opponent who had raised $650,000 in the last quarter of 2010 or 2011, whatever year it was. And I thought, she's going to lose the primary. And if somebody doesn't step up, we'll have no one but ourselves to blame if somebody from the Tea Party becomes our U.S. Senator. And Scott Dambois was a good guy. I got to know him a little bit during the campaign, but that's why I decided to run. Of course, other people saw the same thing, and that's why John Hink got in and Cynthia Dill. And then, of course, Olympia, she saw the code too, and she dropped out. And once Angus King got in, it was over. But I'd built a campaign and lost the primary. And after losing the job for Secretary of State and then losing the Democratic primary for Senate, people started calling me, so what are you going to run for next? I was like, I don't need to lose 3 elections to figure out they don't want me anymore. And that's fine. But people talked to me about running for Secretary of State again, and I'm glad I did. I had to push a lot of things out of the way to make that decision. I thought, I don't need a title. I've had that. I have a job that pays me well. I don't need that. The things I could not push out of the way were the reasons why I got it in the first place was I like helping people, and the chance to work with those great people again. I couldn't pass that up. And so I did. So it wasn't long before people started talking to me about running for higher office again. My wife in particular would tell people, I will let you know when I think that is a good idea. area. I mean, she'd been through the 2012 campaign. Ironically, she also ran for the House as paper candidate just to hold, and she decided to actually do it. She got elected. She chaired the Agriculture Committee. She was on appropriations, and she finished up her time down there as majority leader, and now she's the assistant clerk of the House. So she's very dialed into this stuff now, and we've had conversations about this for years, and I always tell people, I tell her, I don't tell people this when they ask me, oh, are you going to run for governor? Are you going to run for U.S. Senate? Are you going to run for Congress? That it costs them nothing to feed me feet first into a political wood chipper, you know?
Right.
And are you going to answer the phone when I call you for that $2,000 contribution? But this has come up many, many times. And of course, the situation we're in as a country politically, and I don't care where you are in the spectrum, it's very unnerving. With war in Europe, what's happening in the Middle East, great danger in Asia between Pakistan and India, China, Taiwan, and whatever your political dial is on President Trump, he did get elected. Congress is doing nothing to either support his stuff or to oppose it. And we need help up here. It's nothing against the incumbent. A lot of people are unhappy with his approach to the district. I'm not running because of him. I'm thinking in this time, I have a lot of knowledge. I have a lot of experience. And if you don't put that to use somehow, if you don't offer it up, then you have nothing to show for it but regret, especially if things continue to slide the way they have been. I'm not prepared to start a campaign. You know, when you start a campaign, you have to have everything in place. You got to have the website. You have to have staff. You have to have a bank account. You have to have payroll set up. I've done this before. If you notice my belt buckle, you'll notice it's not my first rodeo. Before I was going to go to those lengths, I kind of wanted to know if anybody would say, Matt, this is a mistake. When I ran for Senate, there were people I trusted. Their opinions I valued. And three of them in particular, I asked, what do you think? And they all said the exact same thing. I'll never forget it. They all said, really? It's only been a few days, but I have gotten the diametric opposite. It's like, I will do anything I can to help you. It's been very encouraging. I'm going to give it some time and then maybe start looking at putting something together, and then I'll make a decision about whether or not I actually run. If the last couple of days are any indication, I think it could be kind of fun. I'm in a 4-year term, so I don't have to pull my ship up on shore and burn it. We're in the down cycle right now. We've finished the audit work, so I have some time to work on these things and see where it takes me. And if it takes me nowhere, that's fine. I mean, if I leave office doing what I've done, not a bad way to get out. So.
Have you spoken with Jared?
I've not. I wasn't sure how that was going to go because, I mean, you do have to be a little cold-blooded here because I wouldn't want to say, hey, Jared, I'm thinking about running, and then have him slam some door. Like I remember when Steve Rowe announced that he was going to challenge Andrew Ketterer for Attorney General, that very night I got a phone call from Andrew Ketterer, and he said, oh, I saw you in the halls the other day. Never occurred to me to ask you if you'd commit to me. And I was like, well, you know, now there's another horse in that race, and I want to see how things play out. So you do have to be a little bit careful how you tip your intentions, because right now I'm not running. I haven't declared anything. I did sort of think I would hear from him, which I have not, but that may come. I don't know what his response has been. I don't think it can ever be pleasant to find out that you're a 3-term incumbent and now someone's going to challenge you, potentially. So that'll play out in its own time.
Yeah. There has been some quotes in the media. I don't know if you've seen any of those.
Oh, yeah, that I can do whatever I want.
You can.
So the issue around how I'm perceived by the public, I've been a little bit, actually, no, I've been absolutely stunned at their initial response. I told you about the response I got when I thought about running for Senate, but this has been the opposite. People are like, I'm all in. What can I do to help? One of the things that people have said is that they trust me. Philosophically, I always felt quite strongly, whether you're in this position of trust, and you learn early on in this business that when you're in a position of authority, there's going to come that moment when your political adversaries will bring their hopes and dreams to you and lay them at your feet. And it's how you behave at that moment that defines you. And I never thought it was rational or moral to punish the treasurer of the East Wagon Wheel Stitch and Chatter Club trying to get incorporated as a nonprofit because their representative was a Republican.
Right.
That's not fair. It's not right. And I've had some very, very tough moments. Like back when I was first Secretary of State, we had that citizen initiative on the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. There were some late petitions. We made the decision to accept those late petitions. Had some driver ed stuff to take around to the caucuses. And I walked into the House Republican caucus and somebody said, hey, it's Matt Dunlap. And I got a standing ovation. And I thought, oh man, I'm in trouble. Because the Democrats were hissing at me. I told them, policy's not my job. Policy is your job. My job is to support the work of the citizens petitioning their government. That's almost a holy thing. When you're in this business, you feel that. Like we had a recount. I had to go to Ellsworth because I was in the area. I had a state car with a police radio, and I had to grab ballot boxes from Ellsworth. And I thought, oh, you know, my mother's right along the way. I can stop and have a cup of tea with her on my way to Augusta. And I put those things in the trunk, and I felt this pull. It's like, I can't stop.
Yeah.
I can't stop. I've got to get these things to the counting center. These are the voices of the city of of Ellsworth, waiting to be heard. And so I've always been nonpartisan in the work. It doesn't always pay off. And like I say, I was always fair. The Republicans liked me well enough. When they had the majority, they politely but rather firmly showed me the door to elect one of their own, and that's fine. I never had any bitterness about that. I certainly sleep well. You know, I was talking to another former high-ranking official about this, and it's like I'm a little stunned at the response. And they said part of it is, never mind the situation with the incumbent and people being disenchanted or angry or whatever. He said, but you also got 30 years of goodwill where you've helped a lot of people. I remember plenty of times when I'd get a call from someone on this road saying, you know, we have a real problem here. We need to get a title expedited. And I said, I'll bring it to you on my way home.
You certainly have. I remember once we had a problem with a Canadian title that you helped us with. It took us a little while to get.
Yeah. And it's those nuances that keep you in this business. And that's the stuff that never makes the newspaper. But when you get to help somebody, it gives you a jolt. You get a little high from it. Now, I did something that meant something to someone. I remember getting a call from a friend of ours whose son later died of an overdose, but at the time they were trying to get the fellow into rehab, and they're on their way to the airport to get him to a rehab center, and he kind of casually dropped it. He lost his wallet. He was not going to get on the plane, so they said, can you help us? So I went over to motor vehicles. That's the one place we can do an instant print, and I ran into the chief detective. He said, what are you doing? I told him. He said, never mind, I'm going to drive you. And he put me in his cruiser with this driver's license, and we had blue lights all the way to Portland, and I handed it to him just as he got to the TSA station. Those are fun stories.
Yeah.
But I had one, somebody recount to me the other day. It's like, look, I volunteered for this other guy. Never do it again. But I remember when I was in high school and I called Matt Dunlap to do an interview for a paper, and he sat with me for an hour. The guy had plenty of other things to do. And you go to Old Town, and I'm not pumping my own horn. This is just reality. You go to Old Town and you walk around the city and you ask people about Matt Dunlap. They can't tell you anything. They can't tell you what committees I was on. They can't tell you when I served. They certainly can't tell you what bills I sponsored or anything I did as Secretary of State. But they can tell you what I did to help their mother or their organization or their business or their kid. We call that retail politics when you're actually, that's why you're there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I've known you for over 10 years. And anytime I called you to speak in front of a group, you were there. The one thing you said to me is, I stick to my commitments. I don't care if it's snowing or ice out, I will be there. And you were.
Yeah. Well, you know, I always tell legislators, you can't deliver much, but you can always deliver me.
So speaking of Secretary of State, I must ask, because this is another headline, not yours. What is the process for creating the wording for a referendum or a citizen's vote? What is that process?
Well, every secretary uses a somewhat different process.
Okay.
There's only a few things that the Secretary of State has complete, undivided control over. And God help you if you do it alone, right? Issuing license plates. If somebody wants a fancy license plate, the Secretary of State gets to make that call. But wording referendum questions, and I did things in a multi-step way. And I don't know what the current secretary does because I've only been in that office one time, and that was for a retirement party for one of my former coworkers there. But what we would do is we'd get the application and the legislation, and we'd kind of paw through the tombs for like previous initiatives that had similar purposes and see what those questions looked like. You really try not to go back further than 10 years because demographics change, the language changes actually. We would use computer scoring on readability. We try to go for a 9th grade reading level. Good luck when you have very complex issues like legalization of marijuana. The readability engines will tell you that pot is more readable than marijuana, which is true, but you know, because everybody knows what pot is, but we couldn't put that in a referendum question. But once you do all that, we would pull together some volunteers, and we called it the Volunteer Ballot Clarity Advisory Committee. I had a high school English teacher, a college political science professor, a couple former members, people who knew a lawyer or two, and we would have a conference call and we just hash out different versions. And now the law says that once you come up with a question, you put it out for public comment for 30 days. And I'll tell you, we never didn't change a question based on public comment because sometimes the public brings you stuff that you didn't think of. And then that's when you finalize the question. I never had a question overturned by a court. I'm very proud of that in 14 years. A lot of people complained about our questions. I had a woman working in our office who was taking a lot of these calls. And I think it had to do with the ranked choice voting, people's veto. And I came in the office and she said, you know, I don't know why people feel the need to tell me how smart they are, but they say, I'm a smart person and I can't figure out this question. And she said, I hesitate to tell you what I did. I said, oh, okay, well, tell me what you did. Well, I got up on the website and I got the question and I read it to them very slowly. And they said, thank you. Now I understand. Some of these questions, if you kind of skim them, they do tangle up, especially people's vetoes, because they are necessarily yes means no questions. Do you want to reject the new law. And that trips people up a little bit. You try not to provide leading language. You don't want to influence the voter. You want to explain the objective facts of what a yes or no vote means. That's the process I used. And like I say, our questions were always upheld. We had a couple challenged, but people would complain, but that was as far as it went.
I think you're right about the skimming. Once you get to the ballot box, if you skim it, even if you did the research before and you knew what it was, I know there are certain questions. Wait a minute. I need to reread that a few times. And ranked choice was one of them.
Yeah,
that was pretty difficult to understand.
One of the things that we've changed in law about how this process works, and it was because of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. That was nowhere in the question. And town clerks were calling us and saying, can we tell people that question 2 is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights? Because they're looking for it. So now people's vetoes still are done the same way they always were, which is you draft the question as you're preparing the signature petition. The petition they're going to circulate. I've been out of the business for a little while. And that question is then printed on the petition itself. But for citizen initiatives, you don't do the question until you certify. That way you can take into account all the public discourse that comes around those types of things so that you could actually put in Taxpayer Bill of Rights instead of saying an act to do this, that, and the other thing, which I don't even remember. It was a very, very long title at the time. So it's changed a little bit. Changes every 2 years, really.
So the other question that I had is, when does party loyalty fit in?
Well, I am a Democrat, and I've been a Democrat my whole life. But when you assume the responsibility for one of these offices, you are responsible to the people who put you there, first and foremost. And, you also run on your own values. So, yeah, there is a time for a party line vote. And this is, I think, also, too, the term moderate, I think, is misunderstood because, everyone has core beliefs. There are things they will never vote against or never vote for. Sometimes people call me a moderate Democrat, primarily because I have guns and I deer hunt. I'll take that. I mean, I tend to be socially progressive. I tend to favor advancement of civil rights, but I also know where money comes from, and it comes from hardworking people, and that's a sacred trust. I made myself a promise that I still cleave to this day when I first got elected to the Maine House, I actually made myself several promises, but this is one that's relevant, which is the day that I think that $1,000 is not a lot of money, I'm getting out, because it is a lot of money. And I want to go back to some fraud investigation work we did a little while ago after I answered this question, but in terms of party loyalty, you don't vote against your district, you don't vote against your values. And if that means voting against your caucus, then you vote against your caucus. And I think that's really, really important. I mean, I was always a pro-choice voter, right? Somebody who wants to dig into my record will find that I voted for an abortion bill once. And that was because a neighbor of mine who knew my politics nonetheless felt this one bill was so important, and she pleaded with me to consider it. And I thought, out of respect, it wasn't going anywhere. It was going down in a sheet of flame. I threw them a vote out of respect. And I think you have to respect your constituents first and foremost. I don't necessarily think displeasing everyone is always, I've done it too. There have been times, in fact, one of these ballot issues, I got sued by the Republicans for certifying a petition late. I got sued by the Democrats for certifying it at all. I've been sued by both parties many times. Same issue. But I mean, I think in terms of that sort of political independence, along with what I consider the moderate piece, is that you're going to have those core values, whether it's a gun issue or an abortion issue, one way or the other, right? Climate change, business issues, that's where you are. But then there's something you've never heard about, and you're asked to weigh in on it and say, okay, educate me. Teach me why I should care about this. And if you can approach that in an objective way, and of course the majority leaders say, oh, you got to vote with us on that. Like, well, let me learn more before I make that decision. And I think that is the duty of any elected official. You are the guardian of your constituents. You're watching out for them. I've got lots of stories about how that can go sideways, but they're instructive lessons to me and they're useful. So when I mentioned the fraud investigation, this is something that we had one a couple years ago involving procurement cards. I won't go into the details, but a fellow walked out of his house wearing handcuffs because of this and is still awaiting trial, but was using a procurement card, stealing somewhere between $2.5 and $4 million. And I told the staff when this became public, you're going to see people in the grocery store and they're going to say, how come it took you 9 years to catch this guy? So whatever you tell them, don't tell them it didn't rise to a materiality threshold, which is something that we would look at. It's not material. Well, for people who can't afford heating oil, $2.5 million is plenty material. So again, that's respecting the public that you serve and work for. And I think that has to always orbit around your intentions as a policymaker.
I agree with that. In case you do plan on running for Congress, that you'll be primarying Jerry Golden if he doesn't run for governor, what is your time frame? What's your timeline that you're looking at?
Well, I think because of the reaction I've gotten, it's probably is going to have to be sooner rather than later. I sort of thought I could kind of dawdle along, stroll more than run, have a decision by the end of the year. I don't think I have that kind of luxury. I think probably before the beginning of July. And that will also afford me some time to build a little infrastructure infrastructure. I remember a friend of mine ran for Congress years ago. He was a dairy farmer, and he had the press conference in his dairy barn. And they said, so Senator, he was in the state Senate, and they said, what's your website? I don't have one. Position papers? Haven't done those yet. Where do people send money? We're working on that. It's like, so what is it you're really announcing today? I mean, you have to have those things in place.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
So that you can, because if people are willing to support you, you can't hold them off because they have other things to do.
Right. Plus, there's a lot of other candidates out there
Right.
with their hand out.
Absolutely.
Plus, with the governor's race too, there'll be a lot of candidates there too.
Yeah, that's going to be quite a horse race.
Yeah.
And I think there's candidates that we haven't even heard of yet that are still planning on getting in.
There
I agree.
is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think on both sides and in the middle.
Yeah.
So.
I agree. Before we let you go, if this were your first campaign stop, what message would you want to send to the voters of Maine's 2nd District?
Well, I think the mistake that we've made as Democrats, and I think this is a lethal mistake, and this is one of the reasons why Jim Dill in Old Town is the northernmost residing elected Democrat in the Maine legislature. We tend to talk to people a lot. We should listen a little bit more. And I think in terms of making better public policy, it's better to hear what people believe, what they want, what their hopes are, what their fears are, and then try to work that out into a policy message and read it back to them and see if they agree. That's how you build support, not only for a political campaign, but for a better future. One of the things that people ask me, what are you going to work on? And it's like, well, I can think of a lot of things I could work on. Broadband, better transportation infrastructure, including like light passenger rail. I mean, that's something, you look at the map of Maine, you can draw circles where people could sit on a train and with Wi-Fi, they could work anywhere in the world and live in Madawaska. And those are things that have always been a formula for, sort of build it and they will come. Broadband's kind of a new thing, but transportation infrastructure has always been the grease that makes our wheels turn more quickly. So I can work on that, but the reality is, and I have the experience now, when I ran for the legislature in 1996, I knew nothing. And I couldn't tell people what I was going to work on. And I certainly didn't know that either when I came in as Secretary of State or as State Auditor, but it's kind of like being a shortstop. You don't know which way the ball's going to bounce. You just have to be ready to field it. I could never have predicted the things I worked on, like the lifetime hunting and fishing license, the Atlantic Salmon Commission, ranked choice voting, Real ID, hundreds of it, trying to run a presidential election campaign in the grip of a global pandemic. All the rules went out the window. And you just have to be ready to cope with those things and keep all those values and principles in place on how you do it and work with people so that it makes sense to them. And I think that's the message you have to take forward is what makes sense to you. I went up years ago when we were observing the sesquicentennial of the Civil War. I went up to St. Agathe and talked to the kids at the Wisdom Middle School about their forebears who'd fought in the war. And a reporter, it was a big news event to have the Secretary of State go to St. Agathe. And she said, what do you want the kids to take away from all this? And because a couple of kids fell asleep during the whole thing. I know better, I said, what I hope they take away is that they are important enough for me to come here. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing that you get back from people when you show them a little respect.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.